back. And if you are joining us right now, we're just getting our second conversation for this morning started, and we are shifting gears, and we are talking about health. And earlier on in our show, we were discussing the heat, and of course, as we often do in our when it's hot like this, we often give you heat advisories, and because there are certain health risks which are associated with being exposed to these high temperatures. And here to talk to us a little bit about that, we are joined by Dr. Fernando Cuellar, who is an internist at the Belize Medical Associates. Good morning, doctor.
Morning, Gavin. Morning, Marlene.
And thanks for joining us. We've had a lot of conversations recently, so much talking about COVID-19. But of course, we are facing a lot of other health problems. So can we talk about what are some of the major risks that are associated with exposure to the high temperatures and sun at this time of the year?
Yes, Gavin, I think you said it quite right. We've been saturated with the whole COVID discussion, but there are other health issues simultaneously happening, And I think this topic that we're going to mention today, or we're mentioning today, is quite timely because, for example, in listening to the weather report today, the weatherman or the weatherwoman would say that the temperatures are high, they have an alert out. And indeed, in my practice already, I'm seeing some people being affected by the heat, which I would want this communication discussion to serve as a warning that apart from being inconvenient, it can actually hurt or even kill you if you're not careful to take care of yourself during this heat, these high temperatures. And
have you seen cases of heat-related illnesses already?
Already. I've seen at least 3 of them over the past week. And indeed, they fit the profile, elderly people who have other illnesses that are more vulnerable for heat. And let me say one time, it's not only about being outside. People in buildings can suffer from heat exposure and heat illnesses. So don't get it wrong that we are the people who are exposed to the outdoors or exposed to the direct heat are at risk. People who are in buildings and houses can definitely have trouble.
Now let's talk about why these groups are vulnerable. We always hear check in on, well, I say it as well, the elderly and little ones. Why are they more at risk when the temperatures rise?
Because in both cases, the system that control the heat regulation is not working well. You have a inbuilt system to keep you at a certain temperature, but when you're elderly or when you're very young, this system don't work properly, so you can run into trouble. And people who have other conditions like heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, definitely that system is affected. So they can't control the temperature well and they run into trouble. So that's the reason why these groups are more vulnerable, can take lick by the heat quicker and faster than a young person like myself.
Now, you said you've seen some cases already where people end up in emergency care, because is that how quickly things can deteriorate?
Indeed, quick things can deteriorate in a matter of hours. And one in particular was the elderly person indoors in her room, locked up with poor ventilation. The windows are never open and the heat rose rather quickly. So I've already started seeing person affected by heat problems in the emergency room.
And what are some of those, or what are some of the main illnesses or conditions that you've observed or that people may be at risk for?
Well, I think the one that stands out quickly in my mind is high blood pressure. And not only the high blood pressure, but the type of medication they're on makes them more vulnerable. Like there's a group of medication called beta blockers that are particularly connected to heat problems, or what they call water pills, diuretics. Mm-hmm. Because diuretics will make your urinate more, urine more, so you're at a more risk for become dehydrated faster. So those are the caveats, those are the little gems that you look out for would say that people are more vulnerable to heat. Diabetes also, diabetes affects everything in the body, including that system for heat control, like I said.
Yeah. Now, Doc, I'm sure lots of people are watching and saying, listen, man, we grew up around this heat our whole life. We know how to, our bodies are already accustomed. We're people from the tropics. But you do, in fact, see people who get severe heat-related illness and that stroke and everything else every year.
Of course, that's a good point, Marlene, because indeed, when we read up or when we know about the heat illnesses, people who are living in these climates can tolerate it better. That's true. If you have somebody coming from the US or the Europe or people who are no used to any kind of temperature, they are definitely run into problems faster and quicker. But we Belizeans, people who live here, can tolerate it more. But definitely every year we see somebody or a few people, or I don't have the exact stats, and I don't think we do. We do see people that run into trouble with heat. Ban and grow, live here for 50 years, 40 years, and still run into problems.
Let's talk.
Yeah. I was going to also ask about what are the risks of also being exposed, to the direct sunlight and the heat from the sun, because that can have its own specific complications as well, right?
Of course, Gavin, and that's a good point. That's why you would tell people who need to be outside during the day. I mean, I would think policemen and that kind of service-oriented people. You have to be less exposed during the hottest time, maybe between 10 and 2. I remember chopping cane for one day, and that was it, Santa Cura, because that's a hard work.
And you gone back to your books.
I gone back to my books, learn my lesson the hard way. But definitely, these people know that they have to take care of themselves, so they would do the work early in the morning up to 10 and then rest during the hottest time of the day. I'm not sure how the people like the policeman can work around that, but they should to minimize the chance that they run into trouble.
Yeah.
Other little things that you give them, if you use loose-fitting clothes, lighter clothes, the darker clothes tend to hold in the heat more, and you try to shade as much as you can, maybe under a building or a structure or a tree or something of sort, so that you run the risk less. But again, I want to stress that people indoors can also have heat problems. And we don't hear it much at Belize, but you hear it worldwide. People get trapped in cars, baby left, and you don't need to left them the whole day, an hour time, and go run into serious trouble if you're left into a closed car. So be careful that you left your baby or your elderly person while you run into the supermarket or go buy something, and then they have trouble after that. No? I think it's also necessary for people themselves to recognize the signs of heat exposure. No?
That's what I want. It starts mild and then it progresses, right? So how do you know when you're distressed?
Well, you're distressed, of course, you start to feel uncomfortable, you start to feel weaker, you could have pain muscles, you could have cramps, you start to get a little more drowsier. One of the big key things, and I don't know how practical this is that the PP, the urine, get very darker, and that is something that you would start to recognize that you may run into trouble. Your skin get warmer, get drier, of course. There's another factor we didn't mention so far, but the humidity plays a role that can increases the temperature, and not just the thermometer recording temperature, though, but that is another factor that makes people more vulnerable for heat conditions. And the other thing is that when you recognize it, when you make sure that you increase the water intake, you force them to drink, you strip them down to maybe underwear, make them cool off.
Should you put them in cold water?
Well, yeah, you see that in the books, but I would be careful that I throw water by anybody or soak in a bathtub or ice cold water. No? You could just put the cool towels on them, or you could get a hose and hose them down, or pat them down with regular pipe water, and that is enough in a household, in a place where there's not a control setting. No? If you want the ice, you could put it under the armpits or behind the head or top of the head, those are the little care around the growing area. Those are these key spots that you would use to help somebody lower their blood temperature.
Yeah.
And if they're not responding in an hour or two or feeling better, then you try to get them to the hospital.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. How do you know when it's urgent care? Like maybe I could cool them down at home, or maybe I need to get them to a hospital.
I think the key there would be their level of consciousness. Now, if you find that the person has become drowsy, and not they respond well, they talk to one, they slur, and not sharp, I think that will be the most relevant factor for saying, you know what, I think that time for get to a hospital. So the level of consciousness plays the biggest role, I think, in deciding when to move.
Mm-hmm.
And you just mentioned this a little while ago, but can you also talk about the importance of proper hydration and perhaps some of the signs that people might be dehydrated?
Yes, water, drink. You don't need to forget no fancy drink. You don't need to forget no big Powerade or Gatorade or any kind of thing. Water could do. And you force that for the person to be drinking maybe at least 1 glass or 2 every hour to hydrate properly. And like I said, you go look on somebody's tongue or somebody's mouth, their lips, they get parched or their lips get dry. That's one of the areas where you could measure the hydration issue or the urination. No? The sweating or the no sweating, that is not so accurate, so to speak. But definitely watching the mouth and the tongue and the lips and see how dry it is, and ask them for see if maybe in an hour time they go pee and how the pee look. If it dark, you know you lack of water. So continue push the water intake. No?
Yeah. Is there anything you should avoid?
Alcohol. I think that's one of the biggest things I see, that people, you get nice up, you're up on the beach, you're out, the party, you have a nice time, riverside, and you drink, and you could easily get dehydrated without realizing it. So instead of feeling that you're invincible and want 2 beer, want 2 drink will make you feel better, be careful there, no? Things like caffeine also, be careful with. And like I said, the people who are most vulnerable are the elderly, and especially if they have certain illnesses and they're very young, no?
Yeah. Now, you talk of the elderly being very exposed, and maybe you can be able to see the signs there, but children, the small ones, what kind of signs would they show? Similar signs?
I think similar signs. Of course, I'm not a pediatrician. I'm not so versed in that with taking care of younger kids, but I think they will get more fussy, more lethargic. They will refuse to eat or something, and just a change overall. I think mothers and caretakers will recognize the changes and take them to the hospital earlier than later. And also they need to remember that the babies, they don't need for the outside. They lock up, they could have blanket top there. You know how we like to wrap up babies and close up the rooms. That is a bit dangerous. So you open the windows. If you have only fan, I see a lot of literature, and surely a literature from Belize when about you should always have air conditioning. That is so very impractical in Belize. But you got a leaf fan, you put it on there, you open the windows, you strip them down to their pampers and keep them cool like that.
Yeah. And in addition to staying hydrated, one of the things I know that is a challenge, especially with the elderly, is that they may not feel the thirst even though they are dehydrated. Why is that?
Because of the same thing like I mentioned earlier, Marlene, the mechanisms, the system that we have to say, okay, we need more water or a little bit dehydration. The brain sends a signal. There's a thirst center, and that's not working well in elderly people, so they don't feel thirst. And you will ask, well, this person is so dehydrated, why they're not beg for water? Because they don't feel the need for. They actually not feel thirsty. Yeah,
which is what puts them more at risk.
Definitely.
Yeah, and what about advice based on some of the things you've been seeing in the clinic so far?
Well, the biggest misconception, I think, that you can't suffer from heat illnesses or heat stroke because you're not there outside. Mm-hmm. I want to push that point or ram that point home that people in buildings, indoors, in homes, can and easily suffer from heat-related illnesses, easily.
Can
You
it
don't have
kill
to
you?
go out in the dialing some. And those people are the people I've seen over the past week.
Yeah.
People who are indoors have been running into trouble.
Can it kill you?
Of course, that's why the big word heat stroke. Heat stroke can affect your brain big time. It can affect your kidneys. It could make you into kidney failure. It can affect your muscles, make your muscles get destroyed. So there is definitely death associated with the heat. And that is why I think it was important for me to come on today to warn people to be careful.
Yeah. And it starts with the very mild from dehydration to heat exhaustion to right up to heat strokes.
Right. And the time limit can be very short. Within a 12-hour period, you can have real trouble. So always be on the lookout.
All right. Well, Doc, any other advice for us?
No, back to COVID.
I know you're
Very
fully
nice.
vaccinated now. You're one of the healthcare workers that's fully vaccinated. You're seeing the
Yes.
numbers. What are your thoughts?
Gratitude and relief that our numbers are manageable. I don't think we ever get to the point where we have to say that we've beaten this and it's zero. But once we can manage it properly, our healthcare system can absorb it, then we should be good. So, but it goes back to all of us, no? So no need for saying big bad word where I used to say at the beginning, but please, it takes care of all of us need to care for ourselves and each other, and not pen pan government for doing it. No, it's a responsibility, and I think we've been doing okay. We could do better. There's always room for improvement, but I think the Belizean people have heeded a lot, and every way you turn is about COVID and numbers and health.
Yeah. And vaccinations, we know that there's still a bit of vaccination hesitancy in the country. We're at 10, maybe 11% now
11%.
Vaccinated.
Yeah, that is something curious, Marlene. I mean, we did expect some hesitancy. We did expect one certain percentage of people to refuse vaccine. Now, that's the nature of vaccine for any vaccine. But we were thinking that maybe and there a little bit around the 10, 15%, but we are unpleasantly surprised that this vaccine has had so much pushback. I've asked myself, I've asked colleagues, I've asked people why they think it is. There are a number of different theories why it's been pushed back, and we just have to keep pushing back that indeed the vaccine is safe and everybody should get their vaccine. Yeah.
And when you see what's happening in places like India currently, you know, it is a really stark reminder that no one is out of the woods as yet when it comes to this pandemic.
That's gut-wrenching. We in the medical community have our CMEs, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And last week, I think it was Friday, we had a doctor from India actually on the ground sharing with us his experience, and it's gut-wrenching. You know? It's gut-wrenching that people are suffering, are dying, and one of the outstanding thing is that there is a lack of oxygen, and I know that dying from lack of oxygen is a horrible way to die, and to look at somebody dying from lack of oxygen. So it's a pity, it's sadness that India is going through this, and we should in any way try to help them as they tried to help us at the beginning.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for weighing in on where we are with COVID, and of course giving us that really important reminder that while we may grow up in the tropics, it doesn't mean that our body is always used to this extreme heat. So thank you so much, Dr. Cuellar.
Okay, Marlene, and a public congratulations from your new appointment for sure.
Thank you.
And we have to talk about your next appointment, but I think we need
yeah, we'll get that plugged in. Make sure you do your annual checkup.
You know which one I'm talking about, not sure.
All right. Thank you so much.
I can't say publicly yet.
All right. Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, it is for gift ideas for Mother's Day. So please stay tuned.